Hello, and welcome to Smeg and the Femmes, a podcast to discuss Red Dwarf from a different perspective. I'm Jan Amelie, and today I'll be talking about Series 6, Episode 6, Out of Time. I'll be exploring this episode with the help of my guest, Veronica Rich, who hasn't gone anywhere in the last 20 minutes or so, so welcome back.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Of course, I know you particularly wanted to cover this one because it has a lot of interesting rumor characterization and so on. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's a very good episode.
Yep, of course, yeah. Right from the very beginning, where the morale meeting. It's such a very it's such a very it shows what this episode does, what this show does so well. It delivers exposition. It tells us, that things are extremely tense. Yeah, etc., etc. But it does it in a funny way.
Yes, it's a good setup for. It's a good encapsulation of all their characters in this one. Kat clearly doesn't care what's going on. Lister is amused by Rimmer, probably to keep from punching him in the face.
Yes.
And Rimmer wants to complain, but Rimmer doesn't want to have to hear complaints. So
exactly, yes, it's very, 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 very. It's just yes. Oh yeah, and of course, this is where we get the reference to Lister basically saying that Rimmer attacked him with a fridge, which is honestly such a cartoonish thing. You're so obviously not meant to take it actually seriously, because that I can't, especially since he doesn't seem upset, Lister. He just seems more sort of bemused.
Yeah. Exactly. Although I will say in this recording, I did catch the cat making some comment about force feeding. That it did relieve me that when you hear Rimmer's trying to insert the refrigerator, you think one thing, and then he says that, and you realize, oh, he probably meant through his mouth. Phew.
Oh yes, I hope so. Although we know Rimmer does kind of have a bit of a preoccupation with sticking things in Lister's butt.
He's mentioned it before.
Talking about that Medibase scene in series 1.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So yeah. Yeah. It's just yeah. Yeah, this sets up. This is a really good episode. It sets up. That everybody is very tense. Which following on from Rimworld would of course make sense if all that messing around with wormholes they actually ended up even further away from Earth than they were before. That would absolutely make sense.
I think it feels like I think it's only like the second time that we've gotten like talking about the tension. It feels like it harkens back very much to Quarantine in that sense.
Yes, and of course the difference kind of is, that in Quarantine, Rimmel for a large part of the episode, Rimmel was separated from the others, whereas here they're all together. So yeah, yeah.
Right. But the whole tension thing.
Exactly the tension. Yes, definitely. Oh yes, I do like the bit where where Crichton says, "I'm no psychologist, sir, but maybe the bleak, lonely, pointless emptiness of our hopeless, futile predicament is beginning to get to him."
I like how they're all talking like it's Rimmer's problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the implication here? Oh, he seems so sunny the rest of the time. Don't understand the problem.
Yes, it's funny because obviously Lister is usually cheerful, but Cat has no problem letting people know if he's not in a good mood, and quite a more sort of bitch passive aggressively. So
Right. They all seem pretty normal except for Rimmer. Now, Rimmer mentions they're all tense, and they probably are, but as soon as Rimmer mentions it, like the rest of them act like they're not. I mean, either that or he's the only tense one and he's just kind of putting it on them. I don't know.
It's difficult to say. I mean, you can read it different ways, and of course, the usual kind of qualification with Red Dwarf, they go with whatever they feel is funniest, But of course, that doesn't mean we can't analyze it in a character way because it's fun to do so. Mm.
I would like to know if they're in deep space when they're in the cockpit a minute later and they're facing, they're starting to talk about the anomalies they're coming upon. How is there a squall or clouds in deep space?
Good point. I mean, I'm so ignorant about deep space, but I mean, I always think when I see clouds in deep space, they sort of put them there because they think it looks pretty rather than because it's realistic, but yeah, yeah,
Just a thought.
yeah. I hadn't considered that. Uh, okay, so next scene, autopilot alert. They're hurrying towards the cockpit. River joins them, etc. Blah blah. And then, of course, we encounter, although they don't immediately know it, and we don't immediately know it, we encounter a reality bubble. I'm just going to be a bit upfront about it. I really do not like the whole thing with the bit where they think Lister is a robot. It just kind of I hate what it implies about his relationship with Crichton. Basically, yeah.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that earlier, and there's a couple of little things in here that kind of bothered me along that reference, and I'll let you rant after I bring up my one little thing here. Crichton references, when he's ranting at Lister, he goes, having to scrub the gussets of Lister's long johns. In an effort to avoid indelicate references, let me just point out that a robot would not have created a situation where that would have been an unpleasant task for someone else to do. There would, for lack of a better way to put it. Um, and Crichton, right. And Crichton is still ready to believe the worst when even Rimmer wouldn't buy it that Lister's a mechanical. And if someone's going to leap on the chance to legitimize bossing Lister around even more, it's going to be Rimmer. So, yeah, I think you mentioned, why is Crichton being such an ass to him and not, giving him time to adjust when Lister has shown him lots of patience?
Yeah. And basically, basically, I'm attributing it to. Well, this isn't actually a word, but I'm attributing it to. He's got quite an internalized mechanoid phobia.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
he's saying to Lister, "You're a droid. You don't have real emotions," and he's clearly showing emotions himself. And it's just and give later on Crichton makes a joke about the shape of his own head here. It's so clearly. Crichton has kind of internalized shame about being a mechanoid. You could argue he shouldn't have it, but he has broken his programming. He's learnt human emotions, and clearly one of those is kind of internalized shame. Unfortunately, yeah.
He's kind of oblivious in the same way that Rimmer was oblivious when he was acute when he was talking about Ace being
That is a good
gay.
point. Of course, we all uh, yes, it is definitely a thing on Tumblr and also a thing on the Discords I hang out in that we're all pretty much unanimous that Rimmer has internalized homophobia. Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, it's kind of nice to see another character that has that does the same thing. But yeah, that may be you have a good point. That may be why he reacts so badly
Yeah,
to
it's just,
Lister.
the reason I don't like it, has absolutely nothing to do with slashiness. I do not ship Lister and Crichton in a romantic sense, but I like their friendship, and I always hated this before
Right.
I even knew what slash was, So it's just, it always just felt wrong for their friendship, which I do enjoy, And yes, I know it's just a silly gag which Rob and Doug wrote wrote because they were extremely pressed for time. They were literally writing this episode as it was being filmed. And the cast were having some of their lines put on the monitors, and even changed while they were literally filming. So I
Right.
know that Rob and Doug were under a lot of pressure, and etc. 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 But and to be fair, I mean, the episode as a whole is obviously a very strong episode. It's not that I dislike the episode; I just don't like this particular part.
It's not the first time. Oddly, I mentioned the quarantine earlier for the tension, and one of the things I noticed here when they come out of the unreality bubble, and Crichton is apologizing to Lister, and Lister snaps back at him. It's one of the only times, in fact, this may only be the second and final time that we see Lister and Crichton, like, where we see Lister actually pissed off at him. Of course, Crichton was pissed at him first. And quarantine was notably the other time that they actually kind of came to
Yeah.
blows,
Right.
literally,
I mean, in quarantine,
over
we don't actually see the
disagreements.
going to blows. We just sort of hear about it afterwards. But yeah, I mean, I mean, you're right. It's very kind of rare for doing Crichton to seriously fall out. But I mean, it makes sense to me in this context, because I mean, Lister is quite understandably, I'm sure, thinking back on DNA, where he treated human Crichton exactly the same as mechanoid Crichton, and and thinking, well, kind of hurt, and I don't blame him.
Right. The one humorous thing I noted is that when they're all standing over unconscious Lister, Rimmer says that he asks why he's more sophisticated looking than Crichton, and I'm thinking it may be one of the only times he ever pays Lister a
And
compliment.
that's true. I mean, usually he's like, oh, Lister is barely human, blah blah, etc. etc. Yeah. Oh, talking of that scene, actually, I'm going to go off on a quick tangent, which I do like the delightfully slashy revelation that there has a tattoo about Peterson on his inner thigh.
Yeah, I made a note of that too. There's a bit of an indication. I mean, this is in canon indication that Lister might not be entirely straight, because it's not like he even phrases it like, he dared me to get a tattoo, like drunk guys do. The way he phrases it sounds like something, for lack of a better, it sounds like something, a man or woman might say about, the opposite sex once they got drunk or something. I mean, it doesn't sound like something your friend dared you to do. It doesn't sound
Yeah,
quite
I mean,
that benign.
I mean, and of course, not forgetting, when Lister sees Peterson in Stasis League. I mean, I know the context is he thought he'd never see Peterson again, but still, he goes up to him and literally kisses on lips. So
Exactly. So yeah, that's not typical matey talk. I think there's something else there.
I think you can absolutely, sort of theorize, that during some of their drunken sessions, they kind of had drunken gropes. I mean, I don't think that's making too much of a logical leap. I mean, the man, he literally has a tattoo on his inner thigh. I mean, this is not something that mates do, really.
No, no, no. If you're gonna get a tattoo of your, of a buddy or something, I'm not a guy, but I think, you get some reference to that. You're gonna have it, on your, your forearm or your, arm, something manly. I
Yeah,
don't know.
have it somewhere that's sort of personal and intimate.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, so okay, we get this bit where they briefly think that Lister is a mechanoid, although both Rimmer and Cat are extremely dubious. I mean, Cat is just some Cat barely says anything. I mean, to be honest, I kind of view the way I think Cat is sort of thinking, really am not convinced, but I'm just gonna watch what happens.
About the unreality bubble is like when Cat disappears, they all forget him. They all suffer the same, conclusion. But when Lister's made a mechanoid, it's not that it's not even that Rimmer and Cat don't react any differently. It's that they actively don't believe it, even with the X-ray thrown up. I mean, Rimmer makes some, comment later about, once he's like serving them in the cockpit, he makes some comment hiding it all these years, whatever. But like that takes a while. I mean, it's just interesting how neither of them buy it, even though they're supposed to at first.
Yeah, I mean, and absolutely makes sense, I mean, because I mean, obviously, I mean, yeah, they're used to having a particular relationship with Lister as a human being, and well, I'm just going to say it. I mean, they obviously like him to at least some extent, So yeah.
Right.
So I mean, it completely makes sense, that they'll be reluctant, but I mean, they sort of, shrug and go along with it because they have to for the gag to work, But I mean, yeah. I guess they sort of handle it as well as they can in the circumstances. Rob and Doug, that is, they have two crew members looking very sort of doubtful and just kind of shrugging, and this sort of psychodrama going on briefly between Lister and Crichton, but it gets brushed over fairly quickly because this is a very fast-paced episode and we do not have time for relationship
Right.
drama.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we go on to other, as you mentioned, the reality bubbles, the crew for getting Cat, which is a nice little character bit for Cat at least, because he is genuinely quite distressed, at when they briefly forget who he is. Yeah.
Well, I mean, his entire thing relies on being seen and being known. So,
Yeah. I sort of like the little hint, that he does actually care about the rest of the crew to some extent, which of course we know. It's also like it's always nice to see little hints of it.
plus, from a very practical
Yeah.
standpoint, if he doesn't exist, they're not going to remember to feed him. So,
Yes, that is an excellent point. And then just because this is a comedy show, we get the silly joke with the animal heads as well.
yeah, on the animal heads, it was interesting. I always thought, I've watched it before. I've always thought, oh, they threw four different heads on him. But no, Cat's a deer, Crichton's a rooster, and Lister and Rimmer are both wolves. They're the same thing. And I don't know if that's like a species thing because, they're the same species. Or, I don't know why they're the same animal, but they are.
Well, I mean, I'm not arguing with you. I mean, I'm looking at the script page. The script page thinks that Lister becomes a wolf and Rimmer a fox, but I do not have the episode right to refer to. So I mean, I could be wrong there.
Rimmer
Yeah.
doesn't look like a fox. I could be wrong. I mean, because I paused it and I looked at it because I had read somewhere too that they were supposed to be like a wolf and a fox, and they don't look different. So that's just to me though.
I mean, it'd be interesting in universe if they were supposed to look be the same species because they are essentially the same species. You know what I mean? I know Rimmer's a hologram, but I mean, effectively, he is still human. I mean, everyone relates to him in a human way. So there you go.
And I can't figure out, Cat is literally part animal. Why does he have a deer head? Or why does he look like a deer? I just don't get it.
I mean, really, they've gone for the obvious and given him a cat's head, shouldn't they?
Well, and then Crichton's a rooster, which I don't get that at all either. So I mean, it's all it's just ridiculousness, but it's still, you wonder what the choices were. If that's just what they had in storage at the studio they were filming at, or what.
It could just been what they had in storage, I guess. I mean, it's a silly joke. It gets a laugh. It,
Oh
it,
yeah,
it kind of works in the moment, I guess, I suppose. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay, so then they work out that the reason they've in this reality field is it has actually been set up for a purpose, and that purpose is to keep people away from this time machine, but they have managed to get through it. Dun dun, they have found a time machine. We get a very brief scene of them finding it, and then they decide to use it. And then I do enjoy this. They use it to go back to the heady medieval atmosphere of pre-Renaissance space.
Oh, I think I think I've read too much stuff about time and space because I was looking at this and I laughed at it too. I get the joke, and I'm sitting here looking at this, but I'm thinking, okay, so what it means is they move through time, and they don't move through space in the sense they can't choose how to move through space. In other words, they can't say, well, I want to be back on Earth, 3 million years ago. So if they only move through time and not space, so if you think about it, they go back 3 million years, but they're not in the same space relative to Earth 3 million years ago. Because if they really haven't moved, then that means that the orbit of the sun and the planets are 3 million years behind them still. So they're actually out in space somewhere ahead of it, which means they may not even be in the Milky Way galaxy. I don't know. I was
Yeah,
trying.
I did kind of,
I know what
yeah.
I wanted to say, but it didn't. It doesn't really make sense.
I kind of know what you're trying to get at, I
Yeah.
mean, if they've gone back to the 15th century, would things still be the same, exactly the same around them? Probably
Right.
not, Yeah.
And and it's kind of funny that they did this when they filmed it in the 90s. There wasn't a lot of sci-fi going on, but there was, enough sci-fi. Quantum Leap, you had your Back to the Future, you had all this stuff going on. And up to this point, I don't remember anything else that took into account the fact that if you're going to move through time, you're not necessarily going to end up in the space you want to be in. But this actually referenced that, so it was kind of funny.
Yes. Yeah, it's, one of those times, where Red Dwarf, as a sci-fi comedy, can play it for comedy instead of being all sort of solemn and po-faced about it, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah.
And they actually did touch, they actually did kind of get into the science of it too. But
Uh,
that it was a clever bit that they managed to do both.
Yeah. I do enjoy quite some sort of misplaced enthusiasm. Oh, isn't this fascinating?
Yeah. And you
Yes.
just had Rimmer's line about, heady medieval deep space.
It's just funny. Yeah. But, we're enjoying all this fun, and then suddenly things turn kind of serious, 'cause they suddenly encounter a craft, and oh look, it's an oddly familiar craft.
Um, One of the things that hit me too is they're talking about the unreality pockets were a cause of human built unreality drives. And it made me think of all the drives they've run into over the years. In later seasons, we're going to run into the karma drive
Mm.
in season 11, I think it was.
Yes, samsara, yeah.
That, yeah, that makes everyone, behave so that, they can all get along on a ship together, and what happens when that's put asunder.
Mm.
And then there's this unreality, and then the justice field, I think, back in Justice, that was, I don't it was sort of a drive in its own way. It was like a planet wide drive. It's interesting, all these ideas they've come up with over the years for things that people have built to play nanny out in deep space somehow.
Yeah, I think if I recall correctly, I mean, admitted I haven't seen Samsara for a while, but I think it was kind of vaguely linked to what they encountered in Justice. I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but sort of an adapted version of the same thing. I mean, which they've done before. I mean, they adapted the matter paddle from Meltdown to the Triplicator and Demons and Angels. So I mean, I like the
Mhm.
way. I don't care if they reuse ideas as long as they put fresh twists on
No,
them, and yeah.
no. And like I say, it always seems, it very much seems to come back to the same. Rob and Doug seem to have that, and then Doug by himself since then. There's a real undercurrent there of criticism of capitalism and corporate control.
Definitely. I mean, of course, it's much more blatant in the books, but yes, yeah, yeah. I mean, but yes, definitely. I mean, M Core in series 12 as well. Yes, yeah.
I feel like, how, Star Trek, when it got started, and I know you're not a big Star Trek person, but the whole thing about Star Trek was, well, here's the best of ourselves. We've gotten past, prejudice and war and money and all this, and this is our idealized version. And we're going to show you episodes that we run into other species who are still backwards and racist and all, and we're going to show you how dumb that is by showing, the things that they do. But, Red Dwarf's thing seems to be, corporate and capitalism criticism. That just
Yeah.
kind of struck me just now.
Yeah, I mean, of course it's I'm not into Star Trek, but I mean, of course I can't, it's impossible not to be aware of the the basic premise, and be culturally aware of it. So yeah, I mean,
Right.
and of course it exists in the Red Dwarf universe. Don't give me this Star Trek crap.
Exactly. It's an idealized world that they have not attained. And of course, Red Dwarf is set before when Star Trek is set, so but still,
And of course,
it's
Red Dwarf
fictional.
is kind of the opposite of Star Trek. It's not the elite officers. It's the lowest ranking crew members and stowaways. Well, not stowaways, but you know what I mean. People who shouldn't technically be there and so on. Yeah. Hmm.
Right. People who aren't necessarily qualified. They still have to have a job. They still have to earn a living and to live. And that's the thing about it is that's a whole, capitalism thing. It's called everybody's going to have a job that, whether it pays them well, whether they're happy in it or not, even sometimes whether they're very good at it, just because they have to feed themselves
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
or exist. So
Mhm.
anyway, went
Yeah.
off on a bit of a tangent there, but
It's okay. Okay, so yeah, getting back to they get a signal, and it becomes pretty obvious that it's them from the future, and they decide that Item, because he can wipe his memory, will be the only one to make contact and find out what's happened to them in the future. And he regains some sympathy points when he comes back in, virtually in tears, about what's happened to Future Lister.
yeah, he thinks he's being so clever. He's not saying anything outright what's happened, but yet, he's not sophisticated enough to hide that something clearly has gone terribly wrong with Lister.
Yeah, it's funny and sweet, and of course it's blindingly obvious, as you say to the others, that there is something wrong, and that something relates to the stuff.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's agreed, that they won't, that Crichton will be the only one to meet their future selves, because otherwise it'll blow their minds. But Lister, who of course is not stupid, is uh wants to know what happened to him, and plus obviously the understandable curiosity about what's happened to all of them, and I like this bit. We get another indication, that he's actually quite smart, actually, and he manages to hack into the security cameras.
Yes, I made a note of that too. More evidence of his technical know-how.
Yeah, because I mean, Lister does get. I mean, to be fair, I mean, he often downplays his own intelligence, but Lister does get kind of simplified sometimes, into someone who's not very bright, and he clearly is bright. It's just he doesn't always lie his brains in the best direction. Yeah.
Well, again, yeah, kind of a capitalist casualty here. Here's someone who is very good at doing a thing, but in order to get to the point where he could do that thing usefully in the normal course of things, he would have to go through, classes and classes and tests and classes and a ranking system and all. And that clearly does not work for him. He does not have the personality for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I mean, in the backwards book, there's actually a bit, which basically says that Spanners has forced himself, to sort of bite his tongue, and not insult his superiors and stuff, so that he could get into the position he currently is, so that's one version of List that managed to do it, but I mean it's not it says he's not naturally respectful of the chain of command, which is pretty mildly. Yeah.
To say the least.
So then of course we actually meet the future crew, and things turn very nasty and disturbing. Well, for a dwarf, yeah.
Um, from just a shallow point of view, it's interesting how they, and it was done for comedy, but it's interesting how they age him up, how they're going to look in 15 years. And here we are 30 years later, and the actors look far, far better than the characters
It's
still.
hilarious how completely off they were, really. I mean, I guess part of that might, might be that 15 years is nowhere near long enough for them to change that much anyway. To be honest, even if they are living a decadent lifestyle, but yeah, it's just funny how completely off they were in every way. Yeah.
I know. I wonder why 15 years was chosen. I'm thinking, well, this is believable. Maybe if you say they've been at it for 30 years, yeah, now that might be believable, possible. But gee, 15? That's an odd choice.
We're talking about 30 something. Well, 30 something in Chris's case. I mean, Lister was still in his 20. Craig was still in his 20s, I think. So I mean, yeah. So yeah, I mean, and Danny, a super fit dancer in his 30s is also not going to change that much in 15 years.
Right. Exactly. So,
I know we're supposed to believe that they've been living a decadent lifestyle and eating a lot, but even so, yeah.
yeah.
It's a hologram, so I mean, why would he change his projection like that? It doesn't really make sense.
Uh, it does kind of lend a little credence to the idea that he's programmed to age, or he's tied in, that as long as Lister's alive, he is programmed to advance according to how he lives, maybe. I mean, we see him age in the later series because you can't stop the actor from
Yeah.
aging, but we see Rimmer age, but he ages well. And, Doug has made the comment, of course, that, well, he ages because Lister ages. That's his whole, raison d'etre, is to keep Lister sane and keep him company. So I guess maybe this is like an early indication that, well, maybe he ages based on his behavior too. I don't
That's
know.
interesting. Yeah, I think when they, it was not a retcon exactly, but when Doug introduced the idea, it was in Entangled, where Crichton says, that your existence is linked to Lister's existence. I mean, Rimmer doesn't react you would expect you think he'd be a lot more surprised, but yeah, that was where it was brought in, and I think it was an interesting thing to introduce in the Dave era, but yeah.
Yeah, it's the fat part probably surprises me more than anything. But his appearance, his aged hair and face and all, I could see, if there was something, like a karma drive mixed in with an aging drive within him or something. But the size change is a little odd. So
It is.
I don't know.
Of course, I mean, a very long-standing, I mean, as in, literally from the 90s kind of fan theory, which I've got no idea. I got no idea who originally came up with it. I imagine probably fan club people or something. But the very famous theory is, that this future crew we encounter were originally the stasis leak alternative crew, and it absolutely makes sense.
It does. I guess I didn't know that, but yeah, now that you say it, yeah, it kind of does make
Mhm.
sense.
I mean, Stasis Leak alternate Rimmer has a moustache, I mean, and he was at Lister's wedding to Kochansky, and the way the way
Yeah.
alternate Lister behaves, towards our regular Lister in Stasis Leak is kind of a bit off. I mean, I understand the kind of, look, I'm on honeymoon, get out of here. I mean, it's understandable to some extent, but it's slightly off, So it does kind of, you can read into it, that it's a kind of seeds of what we end up seeing in Out of Time.
Yeah. Of course, the Lister and the head in the jar, the brain in the jar in this, one of the things I had wondered is, how does Lister get his head turned by the worst characters of history? The others I kind of get. They don't have his moral compass. But did they do something? I think I mentioned this before too. Is he a brain in the jar because he wouldn't go along with things, and that's why he's a brain in a
Possibly. I
jar
mean,
now?
it's a horrifying thought. I
You
mean,
know, did things get dark with the other
also, of
three?
course, if it is the same crew from Stasis Leak, what happened to Kochansky? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a crew from the Stasis Leak, it makes, more sense. All four of them might have gone bad. But if it's truly them, and it's supposed to be a version of the four right now, later, could Lister have ended up like this because he ran afoul of the other
It's
three? I don't know.
possible. I mean,
It,
yeah, I did wonder, why would this shallow future crew bother carrying Lister's brain around with them? I mean, why wouldn't they just dump it somewhere? I mean, it's kind of odd. Lister. I mean, you could go very dark with it, and say they're sort of keeping prisoner against his will, etc., etc. I mean, he sounds very perky, with the few lines we get from him, but you could kind of, if you're keeping someone prisoner, then maybe too scared to say anything. But that's obviously very dark. But this is quite a dark episode.
or he's unaware he's a brain in a jar and he's operating in some weird cross matrixy thing years before the Matrix even came out.
Yeah, maybe his body is sort of, I don't know, cryogenically frozen or something.
I don't.
Obviously very seriously injured or whatever. But maybe they just sort of take his consciousness around with them or something. I
I.
guess it's possible.
It's all kinds of things. It could not even be Lister. It could just be like a programmed recording, AI recording or something, and Lister's dead or prisoner somewhere.
That is entirely possible. Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's any way you look at it, it's pretty dark.
It is. Yes.
There's
Yeah.
like nothing redeeming about these characters.
Yeah, yeah, it starts off with the ha ha, everybody's fat and bald jokes, and then it all rapidly becomes very, 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 very nasty, it's funny, to watch, our regular crew sort of peering in on them and having a joke and stuff, but it all turns nasty pretty quickly. Although I have to say, this is just me being picky about it, but when it comes to the hanging out with the Hitler's part, obviously that is a horrifying thought. But how do I put this? um, would Hitler hang out with black people? I don't really think he would he?
I don't know. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Huh.
We all know he was infamously anti-Semitic, but he wasn't exactly positive towards black people either. So it kind of feels off. But that's just that's obviously it's kind of a side it's out of universe kind of casting thing,
Right.
but yeah.
I
Uh,
mean, obviously, yeah, I don't even know if Rob and Doug thought of that because clearly they're just picking Hitler because they always pick Hitler. Hitler is their go-to, monster for good reason. I mean, for a very
yeah,
valid reason.
it is true, that is the absolute, you see it in Cured, when Stalin, who was pretty much as bad as Hitler, is introduced, but he doesn't get the same reaction as Hitler.
Well, no, that's for a lot of reasons. Yeah, I mean, it. What Hitler did was so on such a scale and so horrible that
Yeah,
I
I
think
guess it was.
it kind of eclipses a lot of the 20th century's other
I think
crimes.
you're right. It's a question of, the scale, the calculation, the organization, the
Right.
that is what's so uniquely horrifying about it, I suppose. Yes.
Yeah.
There have been a
But
lot of horrible, unpleasant people, uh, um, uh, Hitler is arguably unique in that respect. Arguably, yeah.
of course, now they talk about traveling around and dining with all these people, and but there's nothing said about prid quo pro, and there has to be some because they're clearly, if they're getting, these people they're all mentioning are transactional sort of characters, so there must be things that they are providing to these horrible people to get them to, hang out with them or accept them. They must be bringing them, like, maybe they're bringing them rarities and things.
Presumably, I guess it makes sense, I mean, they could be, yeah, as you say, they could bring Louis the 14th from 16th rare food or something, as you say, or give Hitler something, I don't know, a priceless painting or something. I mean, I don't know. So
Right.
yeah,
I mean, it's not, like I say, it's not, the transactional nature of it is not referenced, but I just assume it has to be there. They have to be providing things to get back what they're getting. So
exactly. Yeah, I mean, you don't just sort of drop in on despots and get wined and dined, for nothing. Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised Crichton's still with them, because Crichton feels like, this feels like a crew that would have turned Crichton into a thing to be traded for something.
And now you mention it, it's kind of, isn't it odd, isn't it? Yes.
So
I do want to mention though, that as this gets worse and worse, and the audience and Crichton are becoming more and more shocked, and then of course we get this moment where the regular crew burst in, and Lister gets this badass get off my ship moment.
yep. Yeah, when you've there's all these characters they're meeting. I think when you've alarmed Rimmer, that's when, he's willing to accompany and go down and yell at him too. When you've alarmed Rimmer, you've gotten to a bad place.
Yeah, I mean, Rimmer is there, looking scared, admittedly, bringing up the rear, but I mean, he's with them, I mean, even Rimmer is shocked, So I mean, there you go, yeah. Yeah, which of course does lead into a favourite moment for Rimmer fans, which is they've thrown the future crew off, but the future crew are not finished, and are going to threaten them with destruction unless they hand over the information, and then we get the better dead than smeg moment from Rimmer. Yeah.
Maybe one of the best lines in the series.
Oh yes. It was a very popular T-shirt back in the 90s. Of course, obviously for a good reason. It's a kind of pivotal character moment, and it's also a snappy T-shirt slogan.
Right. And that's what I said. I'm not saying he wouldn't have been horrified otherwise, but I just have to wonder, without the events of Rimmer World, would he been as on board with, okay, to heck with this. No, this isn't going to work out.
Right, actually, because obviously in universe, he has literally just, seen the effects of of try of his own psyche can do, and must have been
Right.
to at least to some. I mean, he had 6 centuries to think about it, and
Well, yeah, he lived under an autocratic authoritarianism. I mean, he didn't get to romanticize it. He actually experienced what it was like to be a political prisoner and to be, treated that badly.
exactly. And
So,
with Rimmer, we know it's all about sort of romanticizing it. Generals don't fight; they're up in a nice white tent, sipping champagne and stuff. He very much does romanticize it. At least early on. So yeah.
yeah.
And then of course we get the sort of final few minutes of the episode, which are pretty stunning actually, because I mean, this is not what we usually get in Red Dwarf. I mean, we suddenly get actual drama. When we get 3 of our 4 main cast members killed off in rapid succession. And it works brilliantly. And I mean, obviously it's a major part of why this episode has such a high reputation.
I always wondered if the end where Rimmer, is the one left to do the right thing and does it, including it's not just the right thing, it's self-sacrificing, which is not his personality at all. So I wonder if that is what Robin Dug always intended to be the end, or is that a side effect of having to write quickly? As you say, they were having to write and rewrite a lot of the episodes of Six on the fly.
Mhm. It's interesting.
I mean, I don't expect you to know. I just kind of curious about
It's
it out
okay,
loud.
yeah. Well, they were clearly uncertain themselves because there is an alternate sort of cut version where Rimmer does actually save the day, and we see him say, "Smeg, I'm a hero," and they sort of celebrate with margaritas, and there's a kind of slightly weak joke about its urine recycle wine, etc., etc. And I completely
Yeah.
understand why they didn't go with that ending because it just doesn't have the same impact, or I mean, it's much better to end on a cliffhanger. Obviously at the time, it was pretty agonising for fans because there was a big gap of well, several years before the next series came back. Yeah.
Um, the only comparable cliffhanger I can think of in the 90s, and again, I know you're not a Star Trek person, so you probably won't get this reference, but we have listeners who will. The would be the ending between series between season. I'm sorry, I'm American. I'm going back and forth here. Would be the ending of season 3 of Star Trek: The Next Generation, before it goes into 4, and that was just a summer. That wasn't even years long. That was just like May to September when the series picked back up. That the Borg showed up and assimilated Picard and turned him into a Borg, and then the Enterprise, captained by Riker, was faced with having to decide if they were going to attack or because that was their former captain was now part of the enemy, and the end of season 3 of that was Riker, saying fire. And then the fans had to wait the entire summer, and the writers had to wait the entire summer because the Trek writers didn't even know how they were going to resolve
Wow,
that.
yeah. I
So,
think I have seen some gift sets of that on Tumblr, and yes, it must have been amazing. I mean, obviously, I gather from osmosis that they did manage to sort of deprogram Picard in the next series,
right.
but yeah, that was an
But
amazing cliffhanger. Yes.
yeah, so that's, from a sci-fi nerd point of view in the 90s, as I said, that's the only other one I can think of that, people would have been like equally.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
unfortunately, it was another sort of mark against Series 7, in some fans' eyes, because first they had to wait ages for it, and then it didn't resolve the cliffhanger satisfactorily as far as they were concerned. And then, of course, Chris was going and Chloe was coming in, Series 7 had so many strikes against it from the start. I mean,
and Rob had
yeah,
left, and yeah,
yeah. I
so
mean, personally, I don't hate Series 7, it's not great series compared to what came before, but to me, it's interesting in my opinion. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Oh well, yeah. I do want to say about so we get this lovely brief action sequence with Howard's dramatic music, and yeah, I want to praise Chris. I love the way his voice wobbles, where he says "Speak, Crichton. How can we change what's happening?" And it's a lovely little way to end it.
yeah, yeah. His and then running through the corridors, trying to get to the time drive, just kind of being thrown back and forth, and running into things, trying to get there. Very, very realistic. Not necessarily a heroic run, but a realistic one.
Of course, now I always think of the Smeg up where he gets a bazooka caught in the door, but
Yeah, he reminds me that the one that has always reminded me of the videos where you see like a big friendly dog picking up a big stick and trying to take it inside the house or something, or through a gate, and it keeps hitting the sides of the gate, and the dog is not getting the idea, that in order to get through he's going to have to turn
yeah,
sideways.
yeah. It's so funny, in the Smeg up, but in the episode, as it was eventually shot, it still works dramatically. It's very well done.
Right.
Yeah.
It does work out very well.
Yeah, yeah, so I mean, yeah, yeah, as I said, it's a good decision to end on on a cliffhanger. I mean, I think I won't get into. I mean, I won't get into Tika, because I mean Tika kind of contradictory things about what happens compared to what we actually see at the end of this episode. And I did cover that with Aubergine in the next podcast. So think I won't get into that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, yeah.
Do you have any general observations about Series 6 as a season, or as being the last of the Rob and Doug era, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you can still it's still a very good series, and I enjoy it a lot, but it feels mean spirited to say it's not as good as Series 5, because Series 5 is outstanding, but yeah. Yeah, I think you can sort of see. I mean, part of it, of course, was the fact that they were under pressure from the BBC to deliver it for broadcast early in the year, so they sort of rushed it. And then, of course, it ended up being broadcast later in the year anyway, so they didn't have to rush it anyway. But they were under a lot of pressure. Plus, of course, they had just come back from the fiasco of trying to get a US version of Red Dwarf off the ground, and it's not surprising in the circumstances that Rob decided he'd had enough and wanted out, But having said all that, I mean, it still works very, very well as a series. I mean, the fact that they had to sort of change their writing style and make life more of a survival challenge for the crew by putting them on Starbug. It does work. It does work very well. I mean, it's. I mean, I think Doug was pushing it, by having Series 7 on Starbug too, but it works very well for Series 6.
Yeah, I forgot this was around the time they were trying to launch the US pilot.
Yeah, I mean, I know, because I'm having just sort of done the rest of the Series 6 episodes and some of Series 7. It's kind of in my brain.
Boy, was that was an experiment. That's
Oh
all I'm
God,
going to say
yes.
about
Yeah. Well,
that.
actually, I still haven't watched the damn US pilots properly. So I don't do well with secondhand embarrassment and stuff. But yeah, yeah. Days I should probably do so. I don't know. I guess I could even do a special version of this podcast. I mean, well, I'll think about it. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about this episode, or Series 6 in general?
No, I think I've said pretty much everything.
Right. Okay. So, well, in that case, all remains is to do the scores, the overall scores and the slashiness scores. I'll let you go first.
Overall, I think I might give it a 9.5. I mean, it's not the best episode, but it is up there. It's very memorable. It does what it says. It does what it sets out to do. It's intriguing.
Mhm.
It has sparked a lot of fic. And it has some good performances in it, and it's got some interesting sci-fi in it. So I'll give it that for a general. It may be rated a bit high, but that's okay. It's my rating. Slashiness. Oh gosh, it's not overtly slashy. Again, kind of like the last episode, I think I might give it a 5, just because there's an undercurrent, but I can't pull out anything like I could with some other really obvious ones, as you say, like Demons and Angels, and some others where you can say, aha, there it is. But so yeah, I think I'll probably stick with a 5.
Okay, well, as far as slashiness goes, I'm going to be a little more generous. I'm going to give it 7 out of 10. I mean, admittedly, I'm bumping that up a bit because of the stuff with this Lister and Peterson.
Ah, that's true. That's true. That may be where I put it at a 5, because the Lister Rimmer stuff is not very high. So
True, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I count characters too. I mean, so yeah. And also, I mean, obviously, there are undercurrents. There are definitely undercurrents in this episode. I mean, well, I mean, to be fair, there's always undercurrents.
yeah,
Yeah.
but you're correct. That is overt.
Mhm. Yeah. And overall, out of 10, I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. I mean, which may be a bit lower than a lot of people would, but like I said, the stuff with Crichton and Lister kind of drags it down a little bit for me. Apart from that, I mean, yes, it's a very good episode. I mean, it's just not one. I mean, everyone has episodes, where they've always been like, that is my absolute. I love this episode. I adore this episode. It's wonderful, and everyone has different ones. This just isn't one of mine. I have other episodes like that. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So we will leave it there. That wraps up this episode of Smeg and the Femmes. Thank you to Hologomet for technical help. And also thank you to my guest, Veronica Rich. It's always been a pleasure.
It's always a joy.
And my customary reminder that you can give us feedback on Tumblr, Discord, or at smegandthefemmes@gmail.com. And also a reminder that all the first 5 series of this podcast are available on YouTube. Just search for Smeg and the Femmes. And the next episode we'll be covering is, of course, a landmark episode, the first one made without any input from Rob Grant, as Doug Naylor took over sole creative control of the TV show, and it returned after a gap of several years, with a great deal riding on it. But we'll get to that when we get to that episode, which is, of course, Cthulhu Ride. And I hope you'll join us then. For now, bye.